Good morning, and thank you for having me to have a conversation with you around these audit outcomes that were presented by our Auditor General, Tsakani Maluleke. Thank you so much.
So financial losses estimated from material irregularities to be about 12 billion rand. What are the other big takeaways from this report?
Thank you so much for that question. So the biggest takeaway, of course, is the theme of this general report, which basically says we are calling for a culture of accountability. And we are saying that culture of accountability will drive service delivery. So what we are showing through this report is that there is a slight improvement in the audit outcomes. Though we are showing a slight improvement in the audit outcomes, we are concerned with the outcomes of the key service delivery departments and the SOEs. As you would know, these are the departments, the entities that are closer to the service delivery on the ground. However, we are not seeing improvement in the credibility of how they are preparing their financial statements. Over and above that, the major concern and the major feature in this report is the fact that if you drill deeper into the performance planning and reporting, and you look at the APPs, the annual performance plans of these key service delivery departments. So I'm talking now about your departments like your public works, water and sanitation, education, health, transport. So these are the key service delivery departments. So when you drill deeper into their APPs, into their indicators, their targets, what we highlight in this report is that there's a misalignment with what sits in their targets to what sits in the MTSF, that is the medium-term strategic framework. You will remember that the NDP has got aspirations to improve the lives of the citizens, and those aspirations are translated through the MTSF, meaning the targets would sit in the MTSF. So the departments have got a responsibility to then ensure that the targets that are set in those departments and entities are aligned to what sits in the MTSF. So the major finding that we are highlighting in this report is a misalignment, a congruence that is absent between the targets in the departments and the MTSF. That is number one. And then secondly, if you look at the mandates of these key departments, there's again another misalignment in what sits in the targets, in the APPs of these departments. Another third aspect that we've picked up is the nature of these indicators, the nature of the targets. In most of them, they are input activity driven. They would measure things like achievement of meetings, a number of meetings must be called upon, a number of MOUs must be signed off, a number of reports must be signed off, and their targets then don't talk to the mandates of this department. So that is a major finding we're highlighting.
I want to ask you this. The Auditor General mentioned how this activity speaks to the provisions of the amendments to the Public Audit Act in going beyond just auditing. Are the different entities that you are reporting on buying into this process of being further scrutinized?
Yes, actually what comes out strong in this report is that you would remember we have been implementing these new powers over 3 years now, and we are beginning to see some gains. We are beginning to see accounting officers responding positively to these notifications. In this report, we highlight the impact that we are picking up, where we have recovered, for an example, an amount of about 14 million. And we are in a journey of recovering some of the losses. And most importantly, we are beginning to shift the culture, because it's one thing to recover losses. It's another to shift the culture to a culture of implementation of internal controls. Again, we are seeing a culture that shifts to a culture of implementation of consequence management. Having said that, so in this report, we talk about 179 material irregularities, but having said that, there are 19 cases where we have to now utilize our powers. We've got to use our powers because we are not happy with the actions that the accounting officers are implementing. So it's a mixed bag. 14 cases have been resolved. A couple of them are in the process of being assessed. There are 19 material irregularities that we are not happy with, where the Auditor General had to utilize her powers, meaning she had to shift to recommendation in the audit report, and some she had to issue remedial actions. So that's what we are picking up within this environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, this culture of accountability that you're seeking, the Auditor General saying that the inaccountability has a negative impact on the lives of South African and the finances of government. You've said earlier that this is at the coalface of service delivery. How are you bringing communities into this process of trying to bring about accountability?
Yes, that's a very good question. So with the strategy of the Auditor General, if you would notice, what comes in strong is the role that needs to be played by various role players. So we've got a model that we have developed that is called an accountability ecosystem model. Within that model, we are saying every role player has got a role to play so that the ecosystem can balance. There we are referring to the officials on the ground. We are referring to the senior management, the internal audit units, the audit committees, accounting officers, executive authorities, all the way up to the coordinating ministries, your presidency, ministries, your public service administration, your DPME, Department of Planning and Monitoring, your COGTAs, up to the parliamentary and provincial legislature and oversight committees. So what we are calling for is that each and everyone within this accountability ecosystem have got to commit to improving the state of weaknesses that we find in these public institutions. Everyone has got a role, including the Auditor General, where our role has been elevated to the role of providing insights, enforcing with rigor, and also influencing slightly differently. And within this eco model, we've got the citizens and the CSOs that you are referring to say we are calling upon everyone to play their part in ensuring that this accountability ecosystem is effective. As you would know, Desiree, you are as strong as your weakest link. So we want to ensure that each and every role player knows that they've got an action to play, they've got a commitment to make to ensure that we shift the culture from a culture of non-action to a culture of action, to a culture of accountability, of governance, of integrity, and of performance. That's what we are driving through the new strategy of the Auditor General.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Ms. Ngoma, from the Auditor General's office, just following that release of the National and Provincial Government Audit Outcomes Report, stating that 179 material irregularities were identified, most of them caused by non-compliance and suspected fraud.